Welcome on back, everybody, to the All Aussie Rules YouTube channel. It's mid-season review time. This is Collingwood Magpies' turn. This is team number 14. As each team gets to the bye, we're rolling through them. Their mid-season reviews. As with all the previous ones and the remaining ones to come, we'll have a look at their season so far. We'll have a quick player wrap-up. We'll have a look at what they've still got to come this year and what we kind of expect for them for the rest of 2024. Before we jump into all of that though, let's have a quick look at what's coming up this week on the YouTube channel. We have obviously the round 14 podcast episode has already gone up on Spotify and YouTube, so go check that out. Adelaide mid-season review came out early today. Now this is the Collingwood one. Pardon me. Hawthorn and Richmond will be coming out on Wednesday. St Kilda Western Bulldogs on Thursday, and then on Friday we'll be having the round 15 preview episode. So go check all of that content out. The mid-season reviews only coming out on YouTube. The other podcast episodes on Spotify and YouTube. Also, don't forget to check out all of the social medias. We have Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at All Aussie Rules on all of them. So go check it out. Plenty of football content all across the board. And while you're at it, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what you think of Collingwood's season so far in the comments. Let's jump into it game by game. Collingwood obviously started the season in opening round against GWS Giants. A game that they lost by 32 points. In another world, they could have won this one. They kicked poorly. GWS kicked really straight. Collingwood kicked 11-16. 82. 32-point loss looks pretty bad to start the year, but I think this game wasn't dreadful by them. It just didn't go their way in the end. They dominated inside 50s, and some key categories in the game just didn't convert it into scores. Round 1, I was about to say round 2. Game 2, round 1, different story. Sydney absolutely belted them from start to finish, really. Collingwood lost by 33 points. Could have been a lot worse for them. Bad turnovers cost them really in this game, but there was other facets as well. They just got out pressured and outworked in the end, and went down by 33 points. Round 2 against St Kilda, this arguably would be their worst performance of the year. They went down by 15. It had been off a tough little period to start the season, obviously. They went Saturday, Friday, Thursday, but no excuses. They just got beaten in the end. After leading by 8 points at half time, they got smacked in the third quarter. At times in the last quarter, they looked like they were going to fight their way back into it, but in the end, went down by 15 points and started the season 0-3. The reigning premiers were in trouble, to be honest. I spoke about on at least a couple of the episodes around this time that I certainly wasn't writing them off. They still had the talent. They just weren't putting it together. Round 4 was at the Gabba, up against the team they beat in the grand final last year, Brisbane Lions, and they came out of the blocks flying, dominated the first quarter. Second quarter, Brisbane absolutely dominated and should have put Collingwood away. They were kept scoreless and certainly didn't look like the same team from the first quarter. Went in at half-time down by 5 points, but they came back out in third quarter, played really well, and then held on to get their first win of the season by 20 points. Round 4 was gather round. They played the Hawks over in Adelaide, and at half-time it looked like Collingwood were going to smash them. It was 58-20 at half-time, so 38-point lead, and then they kind of fell apart a bit, and Hawthorn came flying back, had a chance, nearly got it. Collingwood held on by 5 points in certainly not their best performance of the year. The first half was outstanding. The rest of the game, they kind of struggled. Round 5, they had the bye, so then they came back after that. Round 6, against Port Adelaide at the MCG. Potentially their best performance of the year here. They won it by 42 points after trailing by 22 points at quarter time, and I think they were as far down as 5 goals in this game. But they fought their way back in late in the second quarter, and then throughout the rest of the game just dominated. The flurry they put on late in the second was reminiscent of what they kind of did to a lot of teams last year, where they just stick around in majority of the game, but they win the game in a 10-15 minute patch where they just kick a lot of goals and can't be stopped. Sydney have been doing it a bit this year as well, but that was like the key to Collingwood's success last year was just their ability to really heap the scoreboard pressure on in short periods of time. And that's what they did in this one. Round 7 was Anzac Day. This was Collingwood's first draw. Yes, they've had multiple. Their first draw of the season. Got dominated in that first quarter, especially the first 5-6 minutes, but they fought their way back into it. Both teams probably think they had a chance to win this, and probably both teams think they should have won it. But there's also the argument that both teams should have lost it. In the end, a draw is probably the right result. I don't know, but it was a cracking game either way. Went down to the wire. Both teams had their chances and walked away splitting the points. Round 8 was Carlton at the MCG on a Friday night. Once again, 3 weeks in a row, Collingwood had kind of started really poorly. They were 14 points down at quarter time. Multiple times they looked dead and buried, but then came out in the second quarter, dominated it. Third quarter, Carlton came out and dominated, and then final quarter, Collingwood just put the pedal down and got it done. Thanks to a Nick Dacos goal with about a minute to go to win it by 6. Round 7, nowhere near round 7. Round 9, they hosted West Coast at Marvel, and they kind of did what they were expected to do. They won it by 66 points. This is kind of the time where injuries started hitting the Pies. It didn't hurt them so much in this game. They're up by 55 points at half time, extended it out to 72 points at three-quarter time. But they were kind of just walking to the finish line, both teams really, not wanting to get any more injuries and just content with the margin, I guess. Round 10, they hosted Adelaide at the MCG. Not a great performance from them. They led most of the way, but at times looked like they were going to get run over, but extended their lead at one point to think Collingwood was safe. Adelaide fought their way back all the way to the end and nearly stole it. Rankin kicked an incredible goal to put them in front with about 7 minutes to go, I think, off the top of my head. Degoe managed to get a mark on the lead from a Nick Dacos kick and went back and kicked the goal, and Collingwood held on by 4 points. Round 11 is probably arguably the most disappointing result for Collingwood this year. They got away with a draw, but this is a game they should have won. They kicked poorly, 10 goals, 15. They led, certainly. They trailed by big chunks in the first half, really, but at three-quarter time they were 16 points clear. It didn't look like they were going to lose. And then they just had no legs left. They lost a few more to injuries this game. They just were out on their feet. And Freo managed to kick a point with a minute to go. And then that was the final score to be the second draw for Collingwood this year and the third draw in the AFL. They followed that up against the Bulldogs at Marvel Stadium with a loss. Their first loss since round 2, sorry. And bit of a disappointing result, really. They were right in this game at three-quarter time. They were even leading by 12 points. So, in the end, Bulldogs overran them in that last quarter. Collingwood didn't even manage to get a goal, and in the end, lost by 3 goals. So, disappointing finish again for them there. That was 4 weeks in a row that they'd lost the last quarter. So, a little bit of a concerning trend starting to show there for them. Round 13 was Queen's birthday against Melbourne. They got like a 12-day break into this, or not 12 days, but I don't know, 10 days, 11 days, whatever it is, Friday through to Monday. So they had a bit of a break, which probably benefited them. Melbourne were coming off a really bad week the week before against Melbourne. And Collingwood came out, won by 38. It probably should have been a bit closer. Melbourne kicked really poorly. Collingwood kicked straight, kicked 14-5. But from start to finish, Collingwood pretty much controlled the scoreboard and got the win in the end reasonably comfortably. Then on the weekend, yesterday, as I'm filming, a couple of days ago when you're watching this, unless you're watching it in the future, then it's even further ago. But they played North Melbourne at Marvel Stadium in one of the topsy-turvy, weird games you'll ever see. North Melbourne came out, dominated the first quarter with 35 points up at quarter time. They extended that out to 48 points at half time. They then kicked the first goal of the third quarter, and Collingwood were 54 points down and all but dead and buried. But as they've done over the last couple of years, they fought their way back into it, took the lead. North Melbourne then got the lead back, and then a Bobby Hill goal with a few minutes to go put Collingwood back in front. North Melbourne had their chances in the last minute or so. Couple controversial umpiring decisions, but North Melbourne still had their opportunity. They had 2 shots on goal in the last minute or minute and a half and missed them both. So in the end, Collingwood won by a point. Certainly not the way they would have drawn it up, but they got away with the win and at least have some sort of momentum going into their mid-season break. So as you can see, their season's going relatively well, certainly after losing the first 3 games. If at that point you had told them that they would be going into the bye with 8 wins, 2 draws and 4 losses, they probably would have taken it. Maybe at the start of the year they might have been like, would like a little bit more than that, but after losing their first 3 games to be at this point, they're probably pretty happy with that. They do sit third on the ladder, but they have played an extra game than a few teams below them. Hypothetically, once the bye rounds are finished, they could drop down as far as 7th, because Essendon, GWS, Geelong and Port Adelaide could all win this week and go above them. But at the same time, they might not all win. So Collingwood will be somewhere between probably 3rd and 7th after the byes, and it's not a bad position when you consider they were 0-3 and almost in a lot of trouble. We will now have a look at some of the stats for Collingwood this season. First up, the quarter-by-quarter analysis. First quarters, they're okay at 8 and 6 on the year, slightly down on points total. Second quarters are same, 8 and 6, but a much better points advantage, plus 4.5 points per quarter, which puts them just over 4 points a quarter, 4 points a half up in the first half. 8 and 6 again. Third quarters, they're 9 and 5, so that's probably their best in terms of win-loss ratio, plus 2 and a bit points. And then their last quarters, although they're 7 wins, 6 losses and a draw in the fourth quarter, their overall points for and against is in the negatives in the last quarter. So perhaps an area they need to work on is their ability to finish off games. If you take out those first 3 weeks, though, they're really, really good across the board. 7 and 4 in first quarters, 7 and 4 in second quarters, 9 and 2 in third quarters, and once again, their last quarters is the only area of concern, which is 4 wins, 6 losses, and a draw. So across the board, they're pretty even, but they certainly, second and third quarters is where they've had their most success this year. They're a pretty low disposal team overall across the board, really. They've only won the disposal count 3 out of 14 weeks, so they certainly don't mind the other team having plenty of the ball. It kind of is the way Collingwood have played. Certainly this year, especially, they put the pressure on. They did it last year as well, but I think they've taken it to a different level this year, where they put the pressure on, try and force the turnover and slingshot real quick, and try and go end to end with maybe 4 touches, 4 or 5 disposals at most, and try and get your shot from that. If you give up 12 disposals to the team going the other way, to then turn it over and have 5, you overall going to have less touches, but that's kind of how they play. They like to play that slingshot from a turnover, defend hard and get the turnover. Looking at it, they are the number 3 ranked team for forward efficiency. They've been pretty good at it most of the year. They're also ranked really high in defensive efficiency. Across the board, their defence has stood up all year. It's been pretty consistent in terms of no injuries in their backline, certainly compared to their forward line, where been just massacred by injuries most of the year, but their back line's been really good. A lot of people would probably be surprised that their forward efficiency is so high, seeing that they have had such a high turnover in players up forward, but players just keep coming in and not playing outstanding by any stretch of the imagination, but they do their job up forward, and it certainly works out for them. Clearances, they're pretty level in this. Overall, they end up about even. But if you take out their 2 bad weeks in clearances, when they played Essendon and the Bulldogs, they lost by 17 to both of those teams. You take out them and they're positive for the year, so 2 really bad weeks there. Centre clearances, they're plus 1.5, so they're certainly better at centre clearances, whereas stoppage clearances, they're in the negatives. Contested ball, they're dead zero. Even numbers across the year, 6 wins, 7 losses and a draw. In the head-to-head contested possessions. Uncontested, they're minus 21.5, as we touched on before. They don't concern themselves too much with the other opposition getting plenty of the ball. Turnover game, that's where they focus their game. They're the number 2 ranked team in turnover game at the moment. That's in causing turnovers compared to your own turnover count, I guess. Number 2, plus 4 per game, and they really use them. They used them really well against North Melbourne in that second half, especially that last quarter. Overall, 1-9, the turnover game, 9 out of 14 weeks, so really high. That's turned. The first 3 weeks was a little bit dodgy in that area, especially against Sydney. They had a bad game, but since round 2, they've won 8, lost 2 and a draw, and overall plus 5.3 per game, so really high there. A team that doesn't focus on uncontested footy is obviously usually going to lose the mark count, and they have all but 2 games. The only 2 times they've won the marking head-to-head is against West Coast of Melbourne, which they won both those games reasonably comfortably, but it's not how they play football. They're the number 1 tackling team in the competition quite comfortably. They did lose it against North Melbourne the other day by 1, but they certainly turned it around in the second half. North Melbourne had a huge amount of pressure in that first half. They had 1 bad week, which was against Sydney, but outside of that, they're either only just losing it or they're winning it by a substantial margin, shown by the fact that their 5 biggest ones, they were plus 34 against Carlton, which is a huge number, plus 32 against Brisbane, plus 24 against GWS and the Bulldogs, and plus 20 against Melbourne. Obviously, they only won 3 out of those 5 games, but GWS, they were unlucky not to win, and the Bulldogs game, they were undermanned and probably shouldn't have been in the game, but they played really well and were in it for the 3 quarters and then just kind of fell away in the end. Having a look at some of the players, the best players for Collingwood this year. Disposal numbers. Dacos is averaging 30. This is Nick Dacos, of course, averaging 30 disposals. He's an elite player. He's going to be one of the best players in the AFL for probably the next 10 years, you would imagine. I think where he's really taken his game to another level this year is his contested football. Everyone was getting into him about the fact that he just ran around the outsides and got plenty of touches. This year he's added contested football to his game, and no doubt the haters are going to find another reason to hate him, but he is clearly top 3 player in the competition right now. He's an absolute gun. Also averages almost a goal a game. He gets 0.9 of a goal. The Collingwood goals are shared around a lot of people, really, because they've had a lot of people in and out of the team. But they also don't have like a key target up forward. Brody Mychek, when he's playing, is that key target, but Kruger's been in the last couple of weeks and showing some decent signs, at least as a target forward. Tackling game is obviously a crucial part of the Collingwood game plan. They emphasise this a lot. Tom Mitchell's their leading tackler. He gets 6.7 a game. Crisp gets 6.4, so really high number as well. Their forwards all put a lot of pressure. That's Bo McQuarrie, Joe Richards when he was playing in his few games, and Lockie Schultz, all elite at tackling. Mychek also is a elite for a tall forward, so their pressure numbers are outstanding. Clearance game, Nick Dacos dominates it for Collingwood. Outside of him, it's kind of horses for courses sort of thing. They all kind of go through there, all try and get a few. I think Crisp has really lifted in the last month at turning that up a bit to take a little bit of the pressure off Nick Dacos, because he has been carrying the load this year. What other stats do we think are important? I'm not 100% sure. Here we go, possessions. Let's have a look at contested. Nick Dacos, 14.5, averaging 14.5 contested possessions a game, which is a massive amount of contested possessions, massively up on what he averaged last year as well. Tom Mitchell, who's widely known as a pretty good contested footballer, averages 10.3, so 4 less a game. Uncontested football is obviously going to be the wing players, so Josh Dacos out on the wing, he gets 17.4. John Noble running off a half-back flank gets 15.3. The Collingwood backline do pretty well at intercept game. Darcy Moore is their leader. I think he's a bit down on last year overall in that facet, but still pretty high. Maynard's been probably their most important, I guess, running backman this year, but he has been intercepting it really well as well. His numbers disposal-wise have really gone up a level. Still Sidebottom started the year really slow, but really once he went back against West Coast, since then has really turned his season around and looks like that was a good move for him, just to give him a little bit more freedom to run a bit further, and his defence work has actually been quite handy. A little bit surprising, really. Pendlebury's obviously injured at the moment. His bulk of the work that he's been really good at is centre. In the centre, he's been dominant. Around the ground, maybe not as good as he has previous years. As we touched on, they don't really have anyone that dominates the scoreboard, but they have plenty of contributors. They rely on everybody in the forward line, all having a go at it, I guess, at scoring and doing, putting the scores on the board. And yeah, that's a look at, I guess, the Collingwood team. That's all their players. So we will now jump into what they have to come for the rest of the season. So they have the bye in round 15. Round 16 they go up against the Gold Coast Suns up on the Gold Coast. A big game, that one, for both teams. Gold Coast's record at home, obviously, haven't lost there yet. And Collingwood will want to be coming out of the bye with their best form, really. Whether they do that or not, who knows, we'll see. But certainly a big game for both teams. Followed by another big game for both teams, Collingwood and Essendon at the MCG. Should be a cracker. Round 18, the first time Collingwood played Geelong this year. And the first time they've played each other, I think, since round 1 last year. So a massive game for both teams. Couple weeks in a row, top 8 teams going up against each other, provided they're still both in the top 8, of course. Round 19, Hawthorn at the MCG. A team that Collingwood have kind of struggled against. Last year they lost to them. They only beat them by less than a goal earlier this year. So that should be another cracker, really. Round 20 is their first match-up against Richmond. Maybe their easiest game in the run home, on paper at least. Round 21, they play against Carlton. The MCG, massive game. And a really tough stretch here coming up for the Pies. They then play Sydney at the SCG, top-ranked team. They'll be an absolute, I'm going to say, as hard a game as they'll have for the rest of the year. Brisbane at the MCG, based on what we've seen from Brisbane this year, you'd hope that they'd win it. But Brisbane did go down to Melbourne and beat Melbourne about 6 or 7 weeks ago, so you certainly can't rule them out. And then they finished the season with Melbourne at the MCG in what will be potentially a massive game, certainly for at least one of the teams. Melbourne, we'll see what they do from here on out, but there'll potentially be a lot riding on this game. Melbourne may be playing for a spot in the 8. Collingwood trying to lock a home final or lock a top 4 spot. Who knows exactly where we'll be, but that last round could be very, very important this year with so many teams so close to each other on the ladder. Where do we expect to see Collingwood finishing? It's certainly not the easiest run home. They do play Sydney, they play Carlton, they play Essendon, Geelong. There's no real super easy games in there other than maybe Richmond. Everyone else is still in the hunt for finals at this point in time at least. So tough run home. I think they'd be expecting themselves to at least win half the games at the MCG, which they have, 7 games, so they'd want to win at least 4 of those, probably 5. Maybe get another win, 6 going in from here on in. Gets them into finals. If they want to play top 4 football, they probably need to win probably at least 7. Maybe 8, to be honest. If they win 8, they're probably going to have a home final and a second chance almost. But it's a very close season, so anything could happen. They could, of course, really not do any good. They go up to Gold Coast and lose that, and then they could lose to Essendon and Geelong. All of a sudden, their season's not in turmoil, but back, they'd be outside the 8 and really struggling again and have to win 5 out of 6 to make finals. So it's one of those seasons where you don't really know what's going to happen, but that's how I see Collingwood at the moment. I still think their best is good enough to match it with anyone. Unfortunately, they don't bring out their best as often as they did last year at least, but we'll see what they do for the rest of the year as the year unfolds. Don't forget, as always, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know where you see Collingwood finishing this year. Are they going to dominate the rest of the season? Are they going to hit their straps? Let me know. As always, like, comment, subscribe. Check out all my socials. Check out all these videos coming out this week. There's plenty more content for you last week, this week, and even next week there's going to be a lot more. So keep coming back. Watch it all. Let me know what you think of it. And thanks again.